Don't sign page 12, the mechanic warned the owner. The lawyer went silent. Evelyn Carter had already uncapped the pen when Walter Reed said, "Don't sign that." Nobody moved. Walter stood at the end of the conference table in his gray work shirt, one sleeve marked with a streak of grease. He hadn't been invited to the signing. He'd only come upstairs because Evelyn needed him to answer one last question about the service department. Now her pen hovered less than an inch above the signature line. Mark Sloan looked at Walter first. Then Daniel Price, Evelyn's attorney. Then Evelyn. "Walter," she said carefully. "What are you doing?" He stepped closer. Page 12. Mark leaned back. "Mr. Reed, this is a financing agreement." "I know what it is." Daniel's expression tightened. "What about page 12? Walter pointed halfway down the page. 82% technician utilization. Evelyn frowned. "What about it?" Walter didn't answer immediately. He was looking at the bottom of the page. The footer sat lower than on page 11. The spacing between two paragraphs was slightly different. Most people would never notice it. Walter spent his life noticing things that were almost right. A belt that sounded fine until an engine warmed up. A tire wearing faster on one edge. A bolt with the wrong shine. A vibration another mechanic dismissed because it only happened above 55. This page felt like that. "Daniel," Walter said, "was that number in the version you reviewed?" Daniel reached for his laptop. Mark exhaled. "This is ridiculous." "Maybe." Walter pointed at the screen. "Check it." Daniel opened the final agreement he had reviewed the night before. He scrolled. Stopped. Then looked at the papers in front of Evelyn. His expression changed. Evelyn lowered the pen. "What?" Daniel compared the screen with the printed document. Once. Twice. He looked up at Mark. "It's different." Mark sat forward. "Different how?" Daniel didn't answer him. He looked directly at Evelyn. "Do not sign this." Walter's eyes moved to Mark. For the first time since he had walked into the room, the investment executive had nothing to say. Daniel placed the two versions side by side. Pages 1 through 11 matched. Page 12 did not. The version Daniel had approved described what Northbridge Automotive Partners could do if Carter Auto failed certain financial requirements. The signing copy added a section titled, "Control Event." Evelyn read the words twice. "English, Daniel?" He pointed to the paragraph. "If these conditions are triggered, Northbridge receives expanded authority over operations." "What kind of authority?" "Hiring. Certain spending decisions. Vendor approvals. Potentially management." Evelyn turned slowly toward Mark. "You told me I would stay in control." "You will?" Mark said. He paused. "Assuming the company performs." Walter looked back at page 12. 82%. Daniel asked Mark, "Who prepared this execution copy?" "Our transaction team." "Who approved the additional language?" "I'll have to check." "So check." Mark took his phone and stepped away. Evelyn rubbed her forehead. "This was supposed to be finished today." Walter stayed quiet. She noticed. "You usually have plenty to say." "I don't know enough yet." That surprised her. Daniel turned the document toward him. "What bothered you about 82%? "Because we don't run at 82. Evelyn said. "We've hit it. For short stretches." Walter pulled out a chair. "Normal is 78. 79. Maybe 80 in a good month." Daniel read the clause. It says a control event occurs if technician utilization stays below 82% for 2 consecutive reporting periods. Walter gave a dry laugh. Then we'd fail almost immediately. Evelyn stared at him. That can't be right. It is. Walter tapped the page. We train apprentices. Warranty corrections count differently. Diagnostics can tie somebody up before there's anything billable. You push every technician above 82 all the time. Somebody starts rushing work or stops training the next guy. Daniel asked, would an investor understand that? Walter looked across the room at Mark. They would if we gave them our numbers. Evelyn froze. During due diligence, Northbridge had requested a year of operating reports. Walter had helped prepare them. Mark returned. My team is reviewing the document history. Daniel said, was this provision in any draft I approved? No. Then remove it. Mark hesitated. That may require revisiting the economics of the transaction. Walter looked up. Not a printing mistake anymore. Evelyn heard it too. You just said the wrong page was included. I said the execution copy may contain language that wasn't properly circulated. Same thing? No. Mark sat down again. The provision itself came out of our risk review. Risk from what? Walter asked. Mark looked at him. From investing several $1 million into a business already under financial pressure. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Mark softened his tone. Evelyn, Northbridge is taking real risk here. We require protection. That isn't unusual. Walter pointed to the page. Protection for you. What protects her? Walter, Evelyn warned. He stopped. Mark closed his folder. We'll send a corrected version today, but I need to be clear about timing. Our investment committee approved this transaction for this week. If we don't have an executed agreement by Friday at 5, the capital may no longer be available. Friday. 72 hours. Evelyn stared at the unsigned agreement. Walter stared at the number that could put Carter Auto in violation almost as soon as the money arrived. The mystery was no longer whether page 12 had changed. It was why someone had chosen a threshold the shop was already built to miss. Walter went back downstairs and tried to work. He lasted 9 minutes. A pickup sat in front of him with its hood open, but all he could see was the spreadsheet Northbridge had requested 3 weeks earlier. Monthly utilization. He remembered arguing with Evelyn over one column. She wanted apprentice hours shown separately. Walter said it made the department look less efficient than it really was. Evelyn had answered, if they're investing in us, they get the real numbers. The real numbers. Walter wiped his hands and went upstairs again. Evelyn and Daniel were still there. Mark had left to speak with his team. Did we send Northbridge 12 months of technician utilization? Evelyn looked up. Yes. Monthly? Yes. Apprentice hours included? Yes. Daniel understood where Walter was going. They knew your historic numbers. Walter nodded. Evelyn opened the due diligence folder on her laptop. The report was there. Month after month. 79 point of arch, 78.4, 80.2, 77.9. Not one sustained period above 82. Evelyn leaned back. They knew. Daniel held up one hand. They knew the numbers. That doesn't prove why the clause was drafted. Walter stared at him. Come on. It matters. If I install a part I know fails at 10,000 miles and write the warranty for 9,900, you're telling me that proves nothing. I am telling you suspicion and proof are not the same thing. Walter hated the sentence, mostly because it was true. Mark returned 20 minutes later with a new copy of the contract. This time, the formatting matched. The 82% threshold remained. Daniel looked up. So, the clause wasn't accidentally inserted. The failure was that the revised language wasn't circulated properly. After my review, yes. And you still want it in the deal. Mark didn't answer immediately. Walter stepped forward. You knew we couldn't hit it. Mark looked at him. Excuse me? You had the reports. We received hundreds of pages of due diligence. You had that number every month. Walter, Evelyn said, but he had already crossed the line. You wrote a trigger you knew would miss so you could take the shop. Mark stared at him. Not angry. Almost disappointed. Then he looked at Evelyn. Is this how you intend to conduct the rest of the negotiation? Mark. No. I'm asking seriously. He pointed toward Walter. Your employee has accused me of engineering a takeover. If the shoe fits, Walter muttered. Evelyn stood. Walter, enough. The sharpness in her voice stopped him. Mark gathered his papers. Northbridge invests in businesses that need capital. Control rights after sustained underperformance are not unusual. If Mr. Reed chooses to interpret that as theft, that's his decision. I'm not obligated to sit here while he does it. Daniel said, then answer the question. Why 82? Our operations team believes that is the level this business needs to reach. Walter shook his head. That's not an answer. It's the answer you have. Mark turned toward Evelyn. I'm willing to continue negotiating. Not with him in the room. Walter laughed once. There it is. Evelyn looked at him. Go downstairs. His smile disappeared. Evelyn. No. For 11 years. She had never spoken to him that way. Walter glanced at Daniel. The lawyer only said, You made the point. Let us work. Walter walked out. For the first time since seeing page 12, he wondered whether being right mattered. Because if he couldn't prove why the clause existed, all he had accomplished was insulting the man holding the money Evelyn needed. Walter expected Evelyn to come downstairs after Mark left. She didn't. At 6:15, most of the bays were empty when she finally appeared beside his workbench. You embarrassed me today. Walter kept his eyes on the drawer he was closing. He was trying to take your company. You don't know that. He knew the numbers. And Daniel already explained what that proves. Walter shut the drawer. So I should have kept quiet. No. She stepped closer. You should have stopped after you saved me from signing something I hadn't reviewed. That landed. Evelyn crossed her arms. You found something important this morning. Then you decided because you were right once, you understood everything. Walter looked away. Walk away from him. Evelyn stared at him. Walk where? He didn't answer. You think I'm taking Mark's money because I enjoy having him tell me how to run my company? I think you're scared. I am. The answer came so quickly Walter stopped fighting. Evelyn lowered her voice. We have a $286,000 property and equipment payment due Friday? Walter blinked. He knew business was tight. He didn't know that. Our reserves are almost gone, she continued. Northbridge closes this deal. The payment gets made, and the immediate pressure comes off. And if you don't, the bank gets leverage, vendors get nervous, everything gets harder. So Mark knows you need Friday. Yes. Walter leaned against the bench. Why didn't you tell me? Because you run my shop floor. You are not responsible for carrying every problem I have. 23 people work here. I know how many people work here. The words came out sharper than she intended. She closed her eyes. That wasn't fair. Walter shook his head. It was. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn looked across the darkened bays. My husband used to say we could fix almost anything if we had enough time. Her mouth tightened. Turns out time is the one thing nobody will sell you. Walter knew better than to turn the moment into a speech. He only asked, "What happens if you miss Friday?" Nothing dramatic at first. She looked back at him. That's what makes it dangerous. Walter understood. No sheriff at the door. No instant shutdown. Just less leverage. Less credit. Less room to recover. Evelyn started toward the stairs. Tomorrow Daniel and I are meeting Mark without you. Walter straightened. Evelyn, you're not in the negotiation. I'm the one who caught the page. And I'm grateful. That doesn't sound grateful. It doesn't have to. She met his eyes. You work for me, Walter. Today you forgot that. Then she walked away. He stayed beside the workbench long after she was gone. The easy version of the story had felt good. Mark was the bad guy. Evelyn was the victim. Walter had exposed him. But there was a problem with that version. If Evelyn rejected Northbridge's money, page 12 might not destroy Carter Auto. Friday might. The next morning, Daniel called Walter before the shop opened. I need you upstairs. Walter frowned. Thought I was banned. You are from the negotiation. Then why am I coming upstairs? Because I asked Evelyn a question last night. Walter heard something in his voice. What question? Daniel paused. Whether Mark changed the agreement without her permission. And she didn't say yes. Evelyn was already sitting at the table when Walter entered. She didn't look angry. That was worse. Daniel closed the door. Tell him. Evelyn stared at her hands. Mark called me Tuesday night. Walter sat down. After Daniel finished reviewing the agreement? Yes. What did he want? He said his investment committee wanted stronger protection. Daniel said, I was not on that call. Walter looked at Evelyn. What did you tell him? She took a breath. I said I didn't care what he needed to do to protect the investment as long as my ownership didn't change. Walter didn't move. Evelyn continued. I told him, add whatever protection you need. Just don't take my company away from me. Walter's stomach dropped. You told him he could change the agreement. I told him he could strengthen the protections. Without Daniel, I was trying to keep the deal alive. You authorized something you hadn't read. I did not authorize page 12. You told him. I know what I told him. Her voice cracked. Walter, stop. Evelyn looked away. I was sitting alone looking at Friday's payment and the payroll after it. Mark said his committee might walk. She swallowed. I panicked. Daniel spoke carefully. There is an important distinction. Evelyn gave broad permission for stronger investor protection. That doesn't mean she knowingly approved this specific control mechanism. Walter rubbed his face. But Mark can claim he thought she did. Yes. And we can't prove he didn't. Not with what we currently have. Walter stood and walked toward the window. For 24 hours he had imagined some hidden email or document would prove the whole thing. Instead, Evelyn's own fear had given Mark room to defend what he had done. Walter turned back. I shouldn't have accused him yesterday. Evelyn looked at him. No, you shouldn't have. I still think he knew exactly what that clause would do. So do I. Walter blinked. You thought I was angry because I trusted him? A little. I was angry because you said out loud what I was afraid might be true before we could prove it. Daniel pushed the agreement forward. Mark has a plausible explanation now. Evelyn authorized stronger protections. His team added a performance trigger. He can argue he believed it was within that authority. Walter sat again. So that's it. No. Tuha. Daniel pointed toward him. But stop trying to catch him confessing. Walter frowned. You understand Carter Auto better than anybody in this negotiation. Use that. The sentence stayed with Walter all morning. He went downstairs and opened the utilization reports again. This time he wasn't trying to prove Mark was lying. He asked a different question. What did Northbridge actually need if its only concern was protecting its money? Reports. Fine. Limits on taking new debt? Fine. Restrictions on huge purchases? Fine. Extra protections? If the company's cash collapsed? Fine. But why should a utilization number Carter Auto already missed give Northbridge the power to run the business? Walter took out a legal pad. He wrote 3 headings. What protects money? What improves the shop? What gives control? Then he stopped asking what Mark had done. He started asking what Mark would refuse to give up. That was a much better question. Walter brought the legal pad upstairs at lunch. Daniel read it. Evelyn watched his face. Well? Daniel tapped the page. This isn't contract language. Walter shrugged. You're the lawyer. Daniel almost smiled. Walter had kept the idea simple. Northbridge could have detailed financial reporting. It could have limits on major spending and new debt. And if Carter Auto genuinely started failing, Northbridge could receive additional protections. But one line had been crossed out completely. Automatic operational control based on technician-utilization? Evelyn shook her head. Mark won't accept it. Walter looked at her. Then ask him why. Hey, already said why. Risk. No. Walter slid the pad across the table. He said a word. Daniel leaned back. We can tie stronger investor rights to actual financial deterioration instead of a single operational metric. Walter pointed at him. Say that tomorrow. Evelyn looked at the proposal. And if he refuses? If his money is protected and he still needs control, then the control was the point. Daniel nodded slowly. That still won't prove fraud. I'm not trying to prove fraud anymore. Evelyn studied Walter. That was the first moment all week she looked less afraid. Walter continued. You need money? He needs protection. Build something that does both. Daniel handled the legal wording. Walter only explained what the business actually looked like when it was healthy, and what the numbers looked like when it was truly in trouble. By 3 o'clock, they had a new proposal. Strong investor protection remained. Automatic control did not. Evelyn read the last page. What if he walks? Walter didn't pretend the answer was easy. Then tomorrow gets ugly. And Friday, probably worse. That's your pitch. I fix cars, Daniel said, and apparently I'm terrible at sales. Evelyn laughed once. Just once. But it changed the room. Walter became serious again. You asked me where you were supposed to walk if you walked away from Mark. She nodded. I still don't know. He pointed at the disputed clause. But signing something built for you to fail isn't a road. Evelyn stared at the proposal, then picked up her phone. I'll tell Mark 10 o'clock tomorrow. Walter started toward the door. Walter. He turned. You're coming. He hesitated. You sure? No. He smiled. One condition, Evelyn said. What? No accusing anybody of stealing my company. Fair. No, interrupting Daniel. Mostly fair. Walter bite. Fine. And you don't speak unless what you're saying changes the conversation. Walter thought about it, then nodded. Deal. The following morning he walked into the meeting with no accusation prepared. Only one question. If Northbridge could protect its money without controlling Carter Auto, would Mark still want the deal? Mark arrived at 10 till. He greeted Evelyn first. Daniel second DC. Walter last. I assume we're ready to finish this. Evelyn slid the revised agreement across the table. We're ready to finish deciding whether we should. Mark opened it. Daniel walked him through the changes. Financial reporting remained. Restrictions on large purchases and additional debt remained. Extra protections remained if Carter Auto's finances genuinely deteriorated. Mark made notes, asked questions, requested one wording change. Daniel accepted it. Walter said nothing. For almost 20 minutes, the meeting felt normal. Evelyn's shoulders loosened. Maybe Walter had been wrong about one thing. Maybe Mark cared more about protecting the investment than controlling the company. Then Daniel reached the disputed section. We removed the technician-utilization trigger and the automatic operational control remedy. Mark stopped writing. No. Evelyn's shoulders tightened again. Daniel said, the replacement protections are tied directly to financial deterioration. They're insufficient. How? They leave management with too much discretion after sustained underperformance. Evelyn leaned forward. You get financial reporting. Yes. You get spending restrictions. Yes. Debt restrictions. Yes. And stronger rights if the company's finances actually collapse. Yes. Then what don't you have? Mark looked at Daniel. Then, Evelyn. Operational authority when management fails agreed benchmarks. Walter felt Evelyn glance toward him. He remained quiet. Daniel said, the 82% benchmark was never agreed. Choose another. Walter finally spoke. 75. Mark looked at him. If our utilization sits below 75 for 2 straight months, something is wrong. Walter pointed toward the contract. Put that in. Mark asked. With the operational control remedy? No. Then, the benchmark has no teeth. You still get the financial protections. Walter kept his voice calm. You just don't get to run the shop. Mark closed the folder. Then we do not have a deal. Nobody spoke. Evelyn looked down at the agreement. For 3 days she had been asking whether Carter Auto could survive without Northbridge's money. Now she understood the harder question. What would still belong to her after she accepted it? She looked at Mark. If your investment is protected, why do you still need my chair? His expression changed slightly. It isn't about your chair. Then answer me. Mark paused. Northbridge does not invest this amount of capital in a distressed operator without a route to control if management fails. Walter said quietly, but you told her she'd stay in control. Mark turned toward him. I told her she would retain ownership. That isn't the same thing. No. Mark looked at Evelyn. It isn't. Silence. There it was. No confession. No hidden email. No dramatic admission that Walter had caught some elaborate crime. Just the meaning of the deal finally spoken plainly. Evelyn could keep her shares. She could keep her name on the building, and still lose the right to decide what happened inside it. She opened Daniel's original version, then the version containing the altered page 12 dollars. She placed them side by side. Did you know we normally operated below 82%? Mark paused. We reviewed the operating data. That wasn't my question. Another pause. Yes. Evelyn nodded. And you still inserted 82. Our operations team believes significant improvement is necessary. Without Daniel reviewing it. That was a process failure. And without explaining to me what the consequence really meant. You authorized stronger protection. Evelyn looked down. I did. Walter watched her. She didn't run from it. I was scared. I told you to protect your money. I should never have done that without Daniel on the call. Mark said nothing. That mistake is mine. She looked directly at him. But I also told you not to take my company away from me. Evelyn. No. Her voice was calm now. You knew what I meant. You just found language that meant something different. Mark's expression hardened. If you reject this agreement, Northbridge withdraws the investment commitment today. Evelyn kept one hand on the folder. Walter knew exactly what that meant. No replacement investor was waiting outside. No surprise buyer was coming. No miracle check was about to appear. Friday was still coming. Evelyn pushed the agreement across the table. Then withdraw it. Mark stared at her. I hope you understand the consequences. She nodded. I finally do. He stood, gathered his papers, and left. The door closed. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, Evelyn simply stared at the empty chair. Then she whispered, Okay. Another moment passed. Now what? Walter didn't answer immediately. He wanted the weight of what she had just done to be real. She had not solved the financial crisis. She had only refused one solution. Then he pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. He had started the list the previous night because mechanics were trained to ask the same question. After something failed, what could still be saved? The second service bay expansion could stop before the final equipment order. 2 fleet service vehicles bought for a contract that hadn't grown as expected could be sold. Non-essential upgrades could wait. Daniel studied the numbers. It's not enough to fix the underlying problem. I know, Walter said. It buys time. Evelyn looked at him. That's all. That's all. And that was the point. Selling vehicles and canceling expansion wasn't an easy solution they could have used all along. It would leave Carter Auto smaller, weaker, and with almost no margin for another bad month. He would only buy enough time to survive. Daniel called the bank with Evelyn beside him. The bank did not forgive the payment. It did not suddenly become generous. But Evelyn offered an immediate principal reduction from the vehicle sale and showed them the reduced capital spending plan. That was enough to reopen the conversation. The next 48 hours were ugly. Both vehicles sold at a loss. The expansion stopped. Evelyn negotiated slower payments with vendors. Walter told the technicians that the expected expansion bonuses were gone. Nobody cheered. Nobody called it victory. But payroll cleared. The bank approved a short extension. Monday morning, the doors opened. Carter Auto survived. Smaller than Evelyn wanted. Tighter than Walter liked. Still hers. 3 months later, Walter arrived before sunrise and found a frame mounted beside his workbench. Inside it was page 12, from Daniel's original approved agreement. Below it, Evelyn had written 4 words in black marker. Read before you sign. Walter stared at it until one of the apprentices stopped beside him. 19 years old? Still learning. What's that about? Walter handed him a work order. Long story. The apprentice looked at the page again. Walter took 2 steps toward the first bay, then stopped. Actually, no. He pointed at the frame. It's about paying attention before something small becomes expensive. The kid nodded as if he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he would later. Walter walked over to the first car of the morning. The engine was running. Somewhere beneath the hood was a faint knock. Not loud. Not yet. Most people probably wouldn't have noticed it. Walter did. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who understands why the smallest detail can sometimes matter most. And follow Curves and Crowns Stories for more.